To the March meeting of the Public Market Advisory Commission. We will begin our meeting. It's 5:32. And we'll start with the roll call.
Commissioner Kachari.
Here.
Commissioner Young. Here. Commissioner Nemeth.
Here.
And Commissioner Wolf and Commissioner Parker are not able to make it today.
Now we'll approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And we'll open up for our first public comment period.
Oh, yes.
Oh, right.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello. My name is Nancy Willoughby, and I've been an artist and vendor for 32 years at the market. And I passed out a form showing a design that maybe someone has already thought of this already, and it might not be the most popular design for some, but it's a practical use of the former sandlot area. It is less expensive, less destructive, less disruptive than the current building design that's being planned. It fulfills the mission to create more vendor stalls, will not destroy the current vendor parking south of the sandlot area. It will not destroy part of the middle aisles, and so stalls will not have to be held for a future date for a more than $1 million building that may never be affordable because it will increase in price every year. It will keep the current driveway intact. It would not disrupt current business as much either. There may even be enough in the budget to also heat the current main aisle in the winter, and may even allow for designing this new stall area to be like the Toledo Farmers Market, where they have pull-down sides and heat, and you could include solar panels if desired. So this is just another idea that would be, seems to me anyway, it would be easier than the huge building where it's supposed to accommodate more vendors, but they're very tiny spaces allotted, and it's really hard to picture people being in those tight spaces backed up to each other. So this is just another idea, and I wanted to present it, and thank you for listening.
Just to clarify, quick question for you.
Uh-huh.
So is this like an overhead building? It's over the current
Oh, I'm sorry.
sandlot area?
Basically, it could be designed to fit into the rest of the market design.
Uh-huh.
And like in Toledo Farmers Market, they do have some pull-down sides. They built the structure so that it can handle that, and it has heat, and then you can bring those up in the summertime. And so just thinking of something that goes along with the design there, it's not going to destroy what we have already or cause more parking problems. So.
Okay. So
Just-
so you're saying like extend the middle aisle,
We keep the
but
driveway
keep
there.
the driveway. Okay.
So the as
With
you can see, the former
sides.
sandlot area
Uh-huh.
includes 8 parking spaces, which they've made north of the sandlot.
Right. Mhm.
And then this area where I blocked out there, it could fit 10 or 9 stalls on each side.
Right.
And I measured most stalls are about 8 feet by 5'5" inches. And so they would fit there. The middle walkway, the middle aisle is 11 foot 11 inches, but you could have a little leeway there. Just something that would fit in and wouldn't cause a lot of disruption and would add 18 to 20 new vendor stalls. So,
Thank you.
thanks.
I missed the beginning, but I can talk, right?
Nice and short. I'm just going to say the same stuff I already said before.
Okay. Artists are valuable members of our market. We've been here for decades. We have loyal customers, and we're a draw to the market. When there's so much competition, please recognize that the high-quality artists at our market are one of the things that make it stand out from the crowd. It does make our market more exciting to customers. We're there steadily throughout the year while other vendors come and go seasonally. We stay till the end of the day while growers or prepared foods might sell out and have to leave early. We fill a positive, needed role that supports the market as a whole. It's the mix that makes it at our market. That's why we're so special. In fact, we're good for the city too, because being artsy is part of Ann Arbor's brand. But you know what's not part of Ann Arbor's brand? Unfair treatment. It's wrong to accept artists as vendors, but single them out and treat them as unwanted. But say we're okay with doing that. We want to limit the percentage or amount of artists at the market, even though we have gone ahead and accepted more artists than we say we want. Does denying artists annual status accomplish that? Does it actually control the mix? Does it work as a second gateway to limit the amount of artists? Well, I haven't been allowed to become an annual. Am I at market in the mix? Yes, I am. So keeping me from being an annual did not prevent me from being in the mix. I am still in the mix. If annual status works to control the mix of vendors, why, when it is set at 12 artists, do we have 22? We're not left over from before the rule. We've been accepted since the rule was made. If you want to set a percentage limit or goal, it has to be set at intake, at acceptance. That's the only place it will function as a mechanism to accomplish that. Yeah, you can't control who retires or quits after that, but denying us annual status doesn't remove us from the market either. If you want 8% artists, don't accept any new artists until there's fewer than 8%. You can't control how long they'll stay. You can control whether you accept another new one before one retires, which we kind of know that concept because that's how we talk about the annual stall, even though it doesn't actually function that way. That's the only way to control the mix at acceptance. If you want 60% small farmers, keep accepting them until you have 60%. If this annual status rule did work to control the mix of vendors, then why, when it is limited at 12 artists, do we have 22? Why, when it's limited to 8% of the annual stalls, do we have 16% artists? We're not left over from before the rule. This has happened since that rule was made. So is that rule working to control the mix? No, and it's because that annual status doesn't. It's not a mechanism for controlling the mix of vendors. It doesn't work that way. The only thing it determines is which stall we go in after we're in the mix. So why are we taking one category of vendor and singling them out for unfair treatment and not allowing them to pick their stalls in a fair order? We can't say it's because we want fewer of them, because we don't limit how many there are. We can't say we want to control the mix because we're not controlling the mix. There's no rule to stop new artists from being accepted, and once we're accepted, there's no time limit, no expiration date. We're in forever. They're in the mix. We have no rule limiting this acceptance of new artists, which is the only way we could control the mix. I'm not an annual. Am I at market? Yes, I am. So not allowing me to be an annual did not prevent me from being in that mix. So what is the justification for treating us unfairly and not letting us have annual stalls once we get to the top of the list? We can't say it's to keep our numbers down because that doesn't do that. And we don't have a rule that would do that, even though we could choose to have one if we wanted. So what is that justification? And then I just wanted to address supporting new farmers. I think everybody wants to support small farmers. Making a new farmer maybe have to wait 16 years instead of 15 for their annual stall is not a reasonable justification against this. Can anybody imagine a new farmer saying, man, I would go to Ann Arbor Farmers Market and set up if I could get an annual stall after 15 years, but having to wait till 16, I feel totally unsupported. Forget it, I'm not gonna do that. Give me a break. And if supporting new farmers is the real goal of market, then let's go ahead and do that. Let's limit all of their 7 categories of vendors, just as we do the artists, and truly give preference to small farmers if that's what we want to do. This argument is just not a good justification to pick out one other category of vendor to single out and treat unfairly. It just doesn't hold water. Thank you. And I'm going to just give you guys copies. If I email it to you, computer will print.
Yes.
Thank you for this.
When you joined the market, Ann, I'm curious, was the 7 maximum annual stalls in place when you joined the market for artisans? Oh, what is the artisan stall limit?
It's
It's not
12.
7.
12.
The 12.
12,
Oh,
yeah.
the 12. Yes.
That was in
It
place,
was.
okay.
It was in place after Darren Otis.
Okay.
I don't know if the rule was in place before this, but I know that it was part of the mediation. Do you know when the mediation was?
I don't know
I'm
exactly.
pretty sure it was sometime between 25 and 30 years ago. Do you know anything?
So to say this out loud.
Oh, sorry.
So, no, I just want to make sure that everyone can hear if they need to. The rule for having 12, the limit of 12 stalls was put in place after the mediation.
As part of the mediation.
As part of the mediation,
Part of the mediation.
which, because before the market used to have, I think it was over 100 artisans, correct? And then there, during the mediation, then,
Are you basing
What?
that on things I've said? Because, okay.
No,
And because Maxine continued even after mediation, even after this was put in place, to keep letting in tons of new artists.
Okay.
Because that's what a lot of us are. Anyways, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. And I'm a little foggy on the history. I've searched. It's been really difficult to find. I haven't been able to find any specific records of that time.
Have you spoken to Judy Schneider, because she was part of it and she has a lot of information?
That would be great. I didn't know that, so
Yeah.
I might reach out to her and
Okay.
ask her to get a little more historical perspective. But in a summary, it used to be there were a lot more artists and vendors, correct? And then we
Yeah.
had this mediation process, and that's when the stall limits were put in place.
Yes, but it still didn't cut down on the artisans at all, because the market manager continued to accept every single one who applied, and I'm one of those.
Okay.
So at no point, then when Parks and Rec took over with their first manager after that, that's when they stopped the intake. And because that's the only mechanism that would affect how many artists there are, that's when we started to come down, is when we stopped accepting new artists, because that is the only way to shrink the number of artists in the mix. Because it kept growing after this rule was made, because this rule doesn't do that.
Okay. Got it.
I have one more question, Ann.
Yeah.
So in your time as a vendor, have you or other artisans challenged this policy to this commission before?
I don't believe so, and it's because we felt completely hopeless about it. And I really didn't even mean to do it this time, and I feel like it's upsetting to try something and possibly get shot down when it's something that's so painful. So I kind of just came out with a little, like, we were signing in one day, and I was looking at a friend of mine who started years after me, who's an annual, and I was thanking her for being sensitive to another annual during another craft annual who can't have 2 stalls. I was thanking her for being sensitive in sort of how that person can't own 2 stalls, So this grower, or she's not a grower, she's a food. So, and Stephanie, Nancy, we were standing next to Stephanie, and Nancy was like, we should, maybe address this. And I was like, oh, okay. And so now here we are. But it is very, like, sometimes it's just hard to try to do something that, we get a lot of vendors who are like, it's a farmer's market, you don't really deserve to be here, nobody wants you here, and, we just get a lot of that every day, and just, we feel bad about our place at the market, so it's hard to come and ask for something. I think that's really the overwhelming what's going on. I think, I can't speak for everybody else. Okay, yeah, thank you guys.
Stephanie, was the mediation over this issue of the balance of the market?
I believe it was. That was a large part of it.
Do we have any other public comment? She already spoke.
Hi, my name is Debbie Marks, and I've been a vendor at the market for 28 years now. I feel like the diversity at the market with the art and the farm goods is what makes the market so popular. We are in the top 25 destination markets. We've been up in the top 10 before, and I believe the reason is the beautiful blend of arts and goods that we do have to offer at the market. We're doing something right. The market's been doing this outdoor for 100 years, and the same place, in the same hours. And I think we just need a few improvements, and we'll be fine. And it would be nice to have the artists recognized after all their decades of devotion to the market. And I agree with Ann, I don't know what I came in the middle of, sorry, but I pay for 2 stalls, I take 2 stalls. I have for 28 years. I would just like that to match on paper so I can come in, pick my 2 stalls, unload, leave, get out of the way of everyone else, and know where I'm going to be every day. I think we deserve that. Thank you very much. See you at the market.
Now we will approve the minutes from February's meeting.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And no presentation? Okay. On to regular business.
Okay. And here we are, artisan vendor discussion. So I would, first of all, I would like to say I do appreciate the artisans for, speaking up on, for the artisans at the market. I do think they add value to the market. I think nobody is arguing with that. I also think it's a good point that Ann makes that limiting it, artisan vendors at intake, is a good way to control product mix, since that is the main thing we are concerned about. However, I think it's also an opportunity to change the way we look at it, kind of starting now, to be more conscious of that point of entry as the guideline, as a stronger way of keeping products balanced than the second point of entry that we're talking about, getting the annual stalls. So I think that's a smart suggestion. I also think that the market is always constantly evolving. I think it's going to look a lot different in even 3 or 5 years than it looks now. I think we're at this point where a lot of vendors are retiring and getting older, and we're going to see a lot of the dailies kind of stepping up into annual stalls. So I think my goal for maybe this discussion is, I have some suggestions for maybe a more concrete answer to some of these. But I'd like to maybe arrive at 1 or 2 ideas, and then, like I said, go back, maybe talk to Judy or our vendors who have knowledge of how that mediation went to help inform it. Also bring it back to the vendors without making, a final decision today, but hopefully come up with something, 1 or 2 things that we do feel good about. So, are there any thoughts? We had laid out last time kind of our options that we had talked about before. So I was just wondering if any of those were speaking to people more than others at this point.
Trying to remember the options.
Yeah, so the options were, there's a couple things we're talking about. We're talking about totally integrating artisan vendors. To remind you, the daily list right now, there are about 7 artisans at the top of the daily list that are kind of stuck there. And then the food vendors start. So one option is, totally integrating it, in which case the next 7 artisans would jump up to the annual stalls.
When an annual
Becomes available. There are 3 stalls that were not, permanent stalls that were not assigned last time because according to the system we use, nobody selected them. So another question is, what do we do with these 3 stalls? Can we assign those to the artisans since they're kind of extra left over? Or can we do a combination of both? Can we do some to food, some to artisans? Or can we, current practice, just give them all to food producers? Another option was, another question on the table, I think, is what Debbie mentioned, which is allowing artisans to have 2 permanent stalls. Now, right now, they're allowed to have 1. And I think those were the ones we had really come up with before.
We did talk about increasing the minimums, but you did a little pros and cons on that. The minimum number of days, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
the attendance.
Yes, we did talk about that as well. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make one comment on that point of entry,
Mhm.
is I really loved that you shared the mission with us
Oh, mhm.
last time. Eventually, it might need to be tweaked a little bit, but when I look at this mission statement, it's very much focused on food, as it should be at the farmer's market. So I was thinking, if you need a way to prioritize artisans at the point of entry, and this would be going forward, not where we are now, is to really think about artisans that can enhance the food at the market. And that could be defined very, very broadly. So potters that are doing things with food, or like Ann makes the placemats and things like that. But I just wanted to put that out on the table because it might eventually really tighten the mission of the market, and especially since food is such a hot item these days, it might be an interesting way to think about creative artists that are enhancing the mission of the market. So again, that would be at point of entry, and just wanted to throw that idea out there.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of it before. My only concern is if we, I think artists, as themselves also stand as a category alone, and like if we get a stellar application from an artist that does something non-food related, I think there are still a lot of them out there that I do feel could add a lot to the market, even without being food related. But I think it's always interesting too to have that relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, and it could be one of the criteria. It doesn't have to be the only criteria, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Cool.
And then I also was thinking about your attendance, and I really appreciated you talking about, especially for food producers, especially for the farmers, that the 15 times per minimum might be a good happy medium because a lot of food is seasonal. But for artisans, and potentially for the food producers, it's not as seasonal. So would there be any benefits to increasing the attendance rate for people that were not as restricted by the seasonality as the farmers are?
So like having a minimum attendance for some?
And that's probably going to be a bookkeeping nightmare for you. I was just thinking about, there are vendors at the market where things are not so seasonal. And the artisans could be one of those categories.
Right. I mean, other markets, what they do is they have daily vendors. And we have daily, obviously, but the way they define them is different. And they just pay by the day. There's no minimum attendance. It's just you come because you have product at that time.
Right.
Because, like you said, some are seasonal. And, you know, I suppose this would take a lot of work, but like how I could see that working is maybe some vendors who know they aren't going to be here 15 or less wouldn't become annuals and move up the list. They would just
Just sit on the daily list.
sit on the daily. But that's kind of the case anyways, because if they don't come 15 times, they go to the bottom of the list. So I
Yeah,
guess
there's
that's
a
kind
few
of how
of
we
those.
answer that. Yeah, there's a number
like
of
the peony
those.
people, and the
Mhm.
lavender.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering if increasing the attendance
Oh.
requirement would shuffle up the seniority on the daily list at all. So, and I don't know the answer to
Right.
that. It was just
Yeah.
another idea.
Yeah.
I like the idea of increasing minimum attendance, but I think that it's making this decision around the artisans a little more confusing. So I wonder if we could maybe table it for
that
the
sounds great.
future. Does that make sense, to separate the two issues? Because
It does.
they aren't necessarily related, so.
Yeah,
Yep.
Okay.
that's true. I like that suggestion.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Well, it kind of seems to me like this situation we're in, which has happened for 2 years now, where there are unclaimed stalls after the move-up process, may be a new norm. We don't know, but it might happen again this year for a third year in a row. And I guess it's related to vendor, people on the annual vendor list who already have all the stalls that they need, right? They're not going to get more, and so those are the ones that are unclaimed.
The ones that are unclaimed is, yes, so with empty stalls, half of them go to the daily vendors who step up to annual. The other half go to annual vendors that want to add a stall. So what happened is last year, not enough annual vendors wanted to add an extra stall.
Or could.
Or could, yes, that's true. So that's why we had those left over.
I mean, well, do you want to share like a
Yeah,
suggestion for
yeah,
action?
So I do feel like this is an ongoing conversation, partly because, as I mentioned, the market changes so much, even within periods of a few years. So one suggestion I had was making a commitment as a commission to revisit this question every 3 years or every 5 years. It depends on how long we want the length of time to be. And maybe deciding, like, for now, this is what we want to do. In 3 years, we want to reassess where we are at as a market, how we feel about these changes, how we feel about, what our vendor makeup is, and maybe we want to, maybe we feel like it's time to make more changes. I'm a little hesitant about, like, if we as the commission did feel like we want to move toward, making it more equal for the artisans, and integrating them more. If we did it, like, doing it all at once right now, I think there also could be, I think there are expectations from dailies. I think that we would be answering to a lot of things, and we wouldn't entirely know what all the effects were. But I do think that maybe, like, making small steps toward this could be a better approach. That's just my 2 cents. And so what I was going to suggest was taking these 3 stalls, giving them to artisans, since they were left over, and then not making any current rule changes, but again, looking at the same question in 3 years and seeing, is this, do we now want to raise the limit? Because one of the things that would change possibly is we see an even greater discrepancy between the vendors who have been on the daily list and the dailies that are jumping ahead of them. Like, what could happen is, you get dailies who have been there for, even just a couple of years jumping ahead of artisans who have been there 20 years. And I mean, it's already a large number, but like it could get even larger discrepancy. And I feel like, you know, that would be a reason why reassessing it in 3 years, we could say like, okay, this is, you know, not working, we need to move more artisans up or something. So my suggestion was those 3 stalls going to artisans for now, revisiting it later, and then the other question about artisans having 2 stalls, I'm not sure if that's, I'd like to hear from you if that's something we want to give artisans an opportunity to select a second stall during the annual move-up process.
And can I say something about that? In physical reality, artisans already take 2 stalls.
Right.
Right, okay.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so the artisan's already taking 2 stalls, they just have to wait to pick. So that might be another thing we want to look at now versus later. So what are your thoughts?
So just to summarize, it would be in cases where there are stalls left over, then you, as the market manager, can look at the seniority list of the daily vendors and make recommendations to the commission and say, like you're doing now, and say, oh, because we have leftover stalls, let's think about what the makeup of it is of the annual vendors and their assignment of stalls. I'm just thinking
Yes.
about how to think about this going
Right.
forward.
So my suggestion there is, because this could recur every year for a while, I think it's a long process. It's been a long process to decide what to do with those 3 extra stalls. I don't know if it would be productive to every single year go through this. I think maybe it makes more sense to assign it consistently until like I suggested, 3 years or 5 years, we come back and look at it and have an opportunity to change it. The reason there's flexibility there is because there's nothing in the rules right now that says what those stalls need to go to.
When there's leftover stalls.
There's
no-
leftover stalls.
Yeah.
I would say this year giving it to the artisans, and then next year going with current practice, which is the next person on the producer list, until we reach that 3 or 5 year mark. Because if we did nothing, it would go to producers. That's the go-to,
Right.
basically. So I'm saying make an exception this one time,
Okay.
and then reevaluate in 5 years. Maybe we're at another point where it makes sense to assign those stalls to artisans or something.
I actually like your 3-year mark better because
Okay.
then there'd be a little more history on the commission, so we wouldn't have such a steep learning curve.
Yeah.
So, you guys are the producers, so you tell us. what you think.
No, that sounds fair,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm in support. I think it makes sense to do a one-time action because there is so much flux in the market right now with attendance and renewals and understanding how that's going to come into play. I think it'd be harder to make like a policy decision or a change too. But, you know, I know when we talked, you had, you know, when we talked, we discussed this issue of, and Anne was referring to it, like the first gateway. So like reviewing applicants at intake and affecting the market mix that way. And it seems like we're all placing a lot of trust in that step or that measure, and yet there is nothing written in the operating rules that governs that decision-making. And you're a fantastic market manager, and I think that you're making great decisions in your time here, but you know, we could have a different one next year. I hope that we don't, but, you know, I think I would feel more confident. I think, you know, a lot of ways why we're floundering with this decision is because we have very little sort of policy to stand on here, and understanding, like really putting into like formal writing what are the priorities of the market. And I know that's a shifting, it's a moving target, and so it is hard to put it into writing, but I think some measure of common understanding around that, I think, would really help, these decisions going forward, and also secure, what our values are regardless of whatever market manager comes into the position.
I think it's a really smart suggestion. I think we could, as a commission, work on that even this year. Maybe some sort of percentage to shoot for each category to keep it, level. Could be one way to do that. Yeah, I think that would help.
Yeah.
I think what Alex said about thinking about values too, I don't want to do this now because we've got too much on the table, but eventually, maybe next winter, depending on what's happening, it might be a great time to look at the mission statement and really do a very nice focused mission statement that could then really drive the decisions behind the market. And I think that might help make things better too. Mission and maybe values, since that's kind of a standard sort of thing.
Yeah, that would be great. That would help me a lot too.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we all feel, so to repeat back what I'm hearing, the 3 stalls, artisan vendors, this is an exception, one time, and then revisit in 3 years to relook at how the market looks like, what are our priorities still, do we need to make any changes? And the question about allowing artisans to select another stall.
How would that play a role in what we have going on now? In other words, those 3 stalls?
Yeah.
It's gonna
It
add
wouldn't.
confusion as far, wouldn't it?
It wouldn't encompass those 3 stalls. It
Okay.
would just be, when we do our annual stall move up,
Okay,
they would be able to pick one of the extra stalls. Or this might be something we want to table until in 3 years and say this was like one of our main priorities or one of the main questions last time. I also we could wait and see how many openings we have for stalls. That might help, because I won't know for sure until June, we'll have a better idea. But once we see how many openings we have for stalls, then if there's a lot, it may.
yeah, is this something that we can put on the back burner for now?
Yeah.
With the capability to bring it back right before stall assignment? So
I think in June would be a good time to
we'll
revisit
definitely
it.
not forget about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can I bring up one point from history? The artisans used to be
In worse position, we used to have to, if a brand new grower would come on their very first day, like the lady who had some grapes in her backyard, she would go ahead of every single one of us. We were pooled at the very bottom of the daily list. Louise changed that, and nobody protested. So when you're afraid to make a move like this, when the last move like this did get made,
Yeah.
nobody got upset.
Thanks.
Also that if we make a quota system, maybe that should be revisited every 3 years, because we don't want that quota system to lock us into
Right.
an empty market.
Also to clarify, Stephanie, so this one-time decision won't affect the number breakdown of stalls, correct?
Correct. So since this is a one-time decision, if next year an artisan retired, it wouldn't mean another artisan would move up.
It goes to a producer.
It would go to producer.
Okay.
At least, and like I said, that's another thing we can review in 3 years, but I'm just suggesting taking a small step, this is a baby step, with the chance to evaluate in 3 years.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. We'll give, it's like a trial balloon and see how it works, and then if there are issues, then it can be revisited.
Okay, all right. Okay, so if we're all in agreement, I will take this back, try to get a little more context about when the mediation happened. And then hopefully we can come up with a decision next meeting.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Market building. Yeah. So next on the agenda is the market building discussion. I have a few updates. One, I had said, every pretty so often I would try to share if there's any news from Parks and Rec or the city about where we are with the project. I know we had talked about possibly giving it out to another bid in the spring. We don't think that now is a great time, would be a good time to put it out for bid for several reasons. Just, I think there might be an opportunity later this summer, but they're not sure. But just the feeling was now is not maybe the best circumstances to get the result we would want if we did put it out for bid right now. So I don't think that's going to happen right now. The other piece of news, it's like a small one. We're working on, one of the city architects is going to come to look at the market site and kind of look at, what it would take to evaluate the foundation of the current structure.
Oh, good. That's great. Good.
So that's kind of getting on the schedule, hopefully within the next few weeks, hopefully before the next meeting. I don't know how much they can tell, but at least they'll be able to tell us how to move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, just on how to, even to understand how to assess it
Yeah.
would be great.
Exactly. So that's all I have. I'd like to hear thoughts on last meeting's presentation about the structure idea.
I thought it was a creative approach. I worry that the design and layout would be almost more disruptive to the current market than building a building in the Sandlot. So just because it would affect a huge amount of vendor parking and the way vendors currently set up both in the summer and the winter, whereas the Sandlot building would affect vendors who set up in the Sandlot, but less so, just the flow of the market. So that was sort of a takeaway. But in general, I'm just feeling strong and confident about the idea of working on the existing aisles that we have, exploring the foundation and what the structure could bear, and trying to compile, cost analyses on ways to enclose, ideally all of the aisles and put heat into them, or at least primarily connecting the office via the main aisle to Carytown. So that main stretch there.
I think there were some very good points made earlier during the public comments. Do something simple in the Sandlot with the possibility to add on to it. I know we're commenting on the last week's discussion, and that was, I really don't think that's a good idea to disrupt the whole market and how it works. It's worked for this long, and, I just think if we tear into it and try to redo too much of it, it's not gonna be the same. And a lot of people come down there because they remember going down there when they were little kids and, or when they were younger, and that's why they go down there. It's kind of like a historic site almost. And I think it's important to leave a lot of it the way that it is. And then, we have some room here where we can do something. I think we should do something there.
Yeah, Sorry, I just want to agree that I do really like this idea for the sandlot too, and I've had the same thought myself. And another thing I like about it is it offers us a summer solution as well as a winter solution. So currently in the summer, we already have, 18 to 20 stalls out there, but they have no shelter, they have no water, no lights in the spring and the fall. So I am a huge proponent of extending the middle aisle down into the sandlot. And then, yeah, if it is a new building, we could build it strong enough to carry sides, and heat and other things, so.
Now, I can't remember how many years ago it was, but it was quite a while ago, probably 20 years ago or so. How long has the house been gone, Stephanie?
I think around 2011. Could be totally wrong though.
Longer than that, I think, hasn't it?
Well, okay, maybe.
Yeah,
Since,
mine was 2004 because I might have been gone because Jack was born.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I want to say it was
Thank you.
early 2000s.
2004, okay.
There's already talk about what they were going to do there before the house was even gone.
Yeah.
Because everyone knew what the plan was with it. And they had talked about extending the aisle just like this, exactly what we're looking at here. The only difference was they were talking about extending the middle aisle, just adding on from that. And they said that that was not a possibility for fire hazard, if a fire truck had to get in there. Does anyone remember that being talked about? Yep.
No, I think it is a good idea to leave that space.
Leave it open. Leave it open, and people can drive around through there.
Or make it high enough, yeah, it could be high.
Yeah,
Right, don't make it smaller, right.
yeah.
Right.
Just leave it open, and it's a whole separate, and then you build that so that has the option and possibility to be added on to a little bit, maybe down the road if you did want to do a building. That would be your start for your building.
Yeah. I do know that, so we are, currently approved by city council to build the building as proposed. And if we were to change it, make it maybe more simple, like that, but in like the similar spot, we would have to, go back and redo that process. I think it is something that the commission, well, first of all, I think that Parks in the City, we are still dedicated to this building, the idea of this building. I think it's still approved and we're still very much behind getting it built. That being said, I think it is worthwhile to explore that as an alternative if we think it is something else that could work, but just keeping in mind that it would have to go through the same approval processes. It doesn't have a site plan approval.
So I just wanted to comment on the last meeting's proposal a little bit. One, I was, as the sort of consumer on the panel, was worried about the flow of people, because I already feel like sometimes I'm doing a figure eight at the market. And then Jeff brought up the point that whatever construction happens should be planned in a way that's going to affect as few vendors as possible. So if there were new construction in the existing places, it should be planned for the winter, basically, when there are fewer vendors at the market, and try to be a project that would be fast and get done, if possible, in a limited amount of time. And then it sounds like everybody's on board for the sand lot, whatever happens with that. For the plan that's already been approved, is there some time limit on that? Is it like there were 3 years for the approval or something?
It was approved for 3 years, but I also have the sense that it could easily, that timeline could be extended if we needed it to. We would have to request it, but I don't think it would be too hard. Yeah, because we're coming up on 3 years. So.
Okay.
Okay, great. Good feedback. So yeah, I think right now with the building, we're just continuing to explore. And you're telling me what to look into. It's a really long process. I'm sorry, but then we'll go and find out what that costs and that kind of thing.
I'd be really interested to see what the city planner has to
I
say.
will continue to work on that, yeah.
Yeah.
Also getting, we did get the bids for the electric and for the radiant heat. I'm working on getting, finding out what solar and a solar piece to that would look like. So
I wonder if we could get the city architect to come to next meeting or May. Would be really great.
I think if he has a lot to say about it after he looks, I don't know if he's gonna say, look at it and be like, we can't do this, someone else has to.
Yeah.
Or, yes, we can do this. So depending on what he has to say, maybe he can, I'll see if he can come, yeah.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
Yeah.
So now we'll have the market manager report.
All right, so just kind of a lot of things are ongoing that I've already mentioned before. We've received 2019 applications for vendors and food truck rallies. We sent a survey to city employees to gauge interest in a workplace CSA. So if we were to have a drop-off here or at a city building and try to help sign people up for a CSA, hopefully that could be, I think what it would come down to is finding out which farms would want to participate and then probably giving, their information to the city employees to pick from among those farms that wanted to participate. Events, just to list market in Wednesdays, start on May. We have CSA Day coming up April 20th, Flower Day May 26th. Guest chef cooking demos are the third Wednesday of each month. Kids activities we're adding new this year. The Leslie Science Center and Hands-On Museum are gonna come and do some really fun stuff for kids the first Wednesday of the month.
Nice.
Food truck rally dates are set. We have our trucks. Those are the ones that applied and that will be coming. And we'll be doing the birthday party August 31st. And I think, as we've said before, we're working with the library to do an exhibit about the history of the market, just to highlight the fact it's our 100th birthday.
So that is Labor Day weekend, is that?
Oh, is it?
Is it?
It's early this year. August
Is that
31st.
Labor Day weekend?
Isn't that the Saturday of Labor Day weekend?
It's the 5th Saturday of the month. There's that last, I don't know. I'll double check. It's not too late to change if it is.
The last Sunday of August usually is, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just
well,
know, I think,
Maybe we want to bump it up a week then.
I just know I have to start teaching like the 4th.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I think it probably is.
Okay. Well, if so, maybe we'll just bump it up a week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good idea.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Because, yeah, we haven't done anything around that yet, so it's still pretty easy to change. All right, and that's kind of where we are with market stuff.
Thanks.
I just want to say that I've been working with Stephanie on the
Thank you.
birthday thing, and she's doing an amazing job.
Oh,
I just
good.
wanted that
I'm
on the
looking
record.
forward to
Really-
it.
Really
There's
nice
a lot of
connecting with a lot of the community.
really cool old photos and history
Oh, I bet.
that's out there. And we're also working on an oral history project too, so that'll be really good to have.
Great.
Yeah.
And just bringing in lots of great people to have a conversation about the birthday, so.
Okay.
All right. Now we'll open up to our second public comment period.
It's Nancy again, and you were discussing about the artisan, amount of artisan stalls, and there was one thing that Lisa Young brought up last week about the 10% idea, and I know that you didn't want to decide yet, but 10% would be 15 artisans, and if you're adding 3, there would be 15. So I just wanted to bring that up as something that you might think about when you talk about it later.
Yeah, thank you.
So, thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna have a
I just want to say, like, in terms of if we do something different from the building, like, just looking around Market this year, the Market's been here for 100 years. Sunday Market's been there for 35 years. We exist in physical reality. For whatever we're putting in the Sandlot, let's just talk to the vendors and see what works for them, not maybe build a 3-foot wall in our loading zone, or maybe not put all the meters exactly where you open the back of your truck to unload. Just couldn't the people planning stuff talk to the people who have been using it for 100 years or 35 years and not talk about, well, maybe we won't be here anymore in 10 years and that's what we should really plan for. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Would that planning works that way?
Hi, I'm Debbie again. I just want to say thank you to the commission for caring, for not brushing us under the table and acting like this is a side event. This is the way we make our living, and it is so important to us. And this common sense approach, we appreciate it so much. We feel like our needs are being met. It is a slow process, but we feel as vendors it's moving in the right direction. We want to thank Stephanie. You're just a down-to-earth girl that feels our need and addresses our problems. Jeff, you're like a breath of fresh air up there, dude, because you are common sense, brass tacks, and you know what the hell I'm talking about. Okay. And you guys are new and fresh, and you add a great balance, and you care. And we really appreciate that as vendors. Thank you so much. And as local citizens as well for the market. Thank you. See you at the market.
I think we're ready to adjourn.
What time is it?
6:30.
Okay. Meeting to an end.
Oh, sorry, how do I do that?
Just say,
Okay.
calling the meeting to an end at
Uh,
6:30.
I'm calling the meeting to an end. It's 6:30.